So you'll write a little sentence and it will give you options for what will come next in very short snippets, 2 to 3 sentences at a time max, that are designed to inspire you to think about what's going to happen next, making it so that the writing process itself is as fun as possible, not as short as possible.
Welcome to the AI for Creative Entrepreneurs podcast, where we guide you through the weird and wonderful landscape of artificial intelligence. I'm Rob Marsh.
And I'm Kira Hug. We are the founders of the Copywriter Club, and our goal is to help you stay ahead of the curve. We'll show you how to use all these new AI tools to maximize creativity, simplify your work and life, and reinvent your creative career so AI can work for you, not against you.
So whether you are a copywriter, a marketer, a creative professional of any kind, join us as we explore the intersection of AI, creativity, and your career.
When in doubt, get weirder. That seems like a solid motto for all of us in our own branding and positioning. It's also the maxim co-founders Charlene Putney and Martin Pichlmair use when building their AI tool, Laika. Charlene is a video game writer and Martin is a computer scientist, and together they've got decades of experience in tech, games, and writing. Together, this creative duo are creating a playground of language and a micro lab for writing, fusing AI and creativity. And in this episode of the AI for Creative Entrepreneurs podcast, we're actually living up to the name of the show and getting really creative. Because these two aren't just building a tool, they're building an entire ecosystem. And as we dig into how writers can train their own model, which is called a brain, on their writing style, we can ultimately figure out how to create our own voice using their tool. We also dig in and discuss the key differences between their platform, Laika, and a tool like ChatGPT, and there are many differences. So if you're interested in learning more about AI tools that are designed by and for creative people like us, you will enjoy this conversation.
But before we get to our interview, this podcast is sponsored by our AI course called AI for Copywriters, Creatives, Content Writers, something like that. That's the name, right? More than 200 copywriters, content writers, and other creatives have used this course to learn more about AI and specifically how to use it as a creative partner in their businesses. And they're telling us that it's helping. Debbie Cormode, who's a UX website copywriter, gave the course 5 out of 5 stars and said, I bought this course to learn more about AI. I'd seen other courses, but didn't really trust the creators. They were pricey. And I know you both create awesome resources and the price was an amazing deal. So I bought the course. I was surprised that this course is updated regularly. I was worried about buying a course that with tech moving so fast that I thought it might go out of date, but you update your course, which is brilliant. Oh, and the prompts are amazing, way more than I expected for the price. So thank you, Debbie, for saying that. We've included a ton of stuff in this course, including the 10 things that you need to know before you write a prompt. So the output you get is good, it's usable. 5 lessons and modules that help you understand what generative AI is, how it works, and specifically the legal and ethical risks of using it. More than a dozen demonstrations of various prompts and how to use them. A prompt book with over 109 different prompts that you can borrow or steal or rewrite, reuse in any way in your own business. With those in your pocket, you're going to be ready to use any kind of generative AI. There's lots of ideas about how to use ChatGPT in your business that you may not have thought about. And there's even a toolkit with more than 100 different writing AI tools. There's so much included, and we've just introduced a new certification to go along with it all. If you want to be a certified prompt engineer, something that more and more clients are looking for, be sure to check out this course at thecopywriterclub.com/AI4C. We will link to it in the notes below.
Okay, let's kick off our episode with Charlene and Martin. So let's just start off with the vision for the tool you're creating and how you're changing the way writers create moving forward. Can you just talk about the big vision for the work you're doing right now?
So the big vision is actually that what we are doing is fine-tuning for the masses. So we are not using big language models like a lot of other tools that are especially useful for copywriting. absolute valid use case. It's just not what we're doing. What we're doing instead is you have an existing piece of writing, a book, a document, or communication, or whatever you have, material that you can work with, that you have access to. And you fine tune a small language model with that, and then you work intensively with that. And it's much more focused on the process of writing than on the results. So it means that you bounce with the AI in small steps, small iterative steps, until you arrive somewhere where you maybe wouldn't have gotten without this stochastic, weird system that language models present to you. So that is the vision for the interaction. For the overall platform, our vision is in the moment, or our vision always was, but what we are building in the moment is really a platform. So it's not so much just an app where you interact with one interface that is just a text editor in the web that is AI enhanced. Instead, we're building this growing army sounds so military, but this growing group of little language models that come from different sources that are all hopefully legal. We have a vetting process for that. So copyright is hopefully not a problem then, that you can use to get inspiration from different sources that are very, very restricted and constricted to a specific voice that they talk in. And that way we want to build a community. We want to ideally build an ecosystem where people even can earn money by licensing content to us that can be used to build these small language models. So that's our overall vision.
So let's talk about this now in practical terms. If I'm a copywriter, or maybe not a copywriter, maybe I'm just writing anything or creating something, how would I approach the tool? What is it going to do in my daily life to help me get more done or to do something better?
Yeah. So if you come to us as a copywriter or a fiction writer of any kind, basically we just need at least 10,000 words of your writing. It's better to have between 30 and 90,000, but over 10,000 will work. And basically you upload that to our tool to make a brain. And you basically just give it, a name, a description. It takes 4 minutes to train a brain on your writing. And then you can immediately start using that. And the idea behind it is that it's going to write in your voice. So we know how great things like ChatGPT and all of the different tools out there that are skins for that are creating lots and lots of text. But a lot of the time it's quite a generic voice. Whereas if you have a very specific brand style guide, or you're writing a very specific kind of fiction that is in your own voice or the way you want to write, then the idea is that you've trained this brain on your brand, on your writing, on your way of speaking and voice, or writing and voice, and then you'll be able to work with that. So you can write a sentence, ask Laika to finish it for you, and it will give you a bunch of different options for ending the sentence, for continuing the paragraph, for what happens next, answering a question. It will do all of that in your voice using your characters, your concepts, and things like that. So as an example, perhaps for copywriters, we've made a brain. We call them brains. They're like little brains on jars that live on the shelf, and you can take them down and work with them. So we've
I
trained
love
a
that
brain
image. That's so cool.
on our own Laika content. So like all of the applications that we've sent out to investors and to accelerator programs, and our website content, our press kit, and everything to do with Laika, we made a brain out of. And then now and then we get stuck or we want to ask something about how Laika feels about something, and we can use that to give us content in the Laika voice, which is our voice.
And it's crazy because sometimes it's really just a sentence where I'm like, yeah, I wrote this, and then I look for it and it's, no, I didn't write it. It just sounds like me. It's completely shocking. And the other thing, of course, that's interesting is we have a lot of brains. As I said, everything is kind of out of copyright. So some of the people are dead for up to 2,000 years. Like, for example, Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher, king of Rome. If you use him and confront him with contemporary material, he can still give you a really interesting, inspirational quote based on, I don't know. For example, we had one live demo with investors where we asked Marcus about his thinking about AI. And his answer was, those people, they don't know what is coming for them.
Yeah. The men with the money in their pockets.
The men with the money in their pockets have no idea what's coming for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
That can be very inspirational, I think.
Can you break it down? Because I feel like our audience has a handle, most of them have a handle on ChatGPT, and like they're starting to use it. They understand the basics of how it works. Can you make the comparison to your tool that seems like it's more about writing it as a collaborator together, building it out together, whereas it feels like ChatGPT will just shoot something out if you get the right prompt. So could you talk through those differences?
So technically, the main difference is that instead of having one monolithic model like ChatGPT is, which is the same ChatGPT for everyone who interacts with it, you make many small models. Like you as an individual can make several if you want. And then you just switch between them explicitly to get one sentence from Marcus Aurelius and then an opinion from, I don't know, Agatha Christie. And then one from your own writing, maybe. So that is a main difference. Interface-wise, the difference is that it's not a chat-based interaction. So you don't have to, you're not working by copy-pasting from a chat into your own text. You are just directly interacting with the text. You're not even explicitly prompting. You're just saying, here I want something. Here I want something else. Here I want something from that person to squeeze it into the text, basically. So that also feels a little bit different because it is closer to working with the text itself and not this like back and forth process that you have with ChatGPT. I think that's kind of the main difference. And we have this additional step where you really work with your existing writing, and it's not just that you copy paste a paragraph in. Instead, you can upload a whole document. You can just upload a Word document, basically, to train the AI on your specific style, your concepts, people you mention, brands you mention, whatever you mention.
Yeah, I think like personalization is really the key word.
So I love this idea. I'm curious how far it will allow me to go, though. So let's say that I upload 90,000 words of my writing, or maybe Agatha Christie or Stephen King, whatever. Can I then give it a plot for a book and get 90,000 words out of it? Or, am I able to discover the lost book of Agatha Christie? Or, like
Yeah.
what is going to come out of it when I prompt
Yeah.
it? How, obviously writing an email, seems relatively easy, but what are the limits here?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. It is quite different. So first of all, just since you mentioned Stephen King, that's just a good side point to mention that we don't allow people to upload copyrighted content. You either
Okay.
are working with a brain that's your own writing or work that's in the public domain. So
Unless you are
yeah,
Stephen
unless
King.
you are Stephen King. If Stephen King is listening to this podcast and wants to come and use Stephen King's content, he's very welcome. But let's
I
say
hear
you
he's a
use
pretty good writer. Yeah, so that would be amazing.
if you used like your own writing or Jane Austen or Edgar Allan Poe or something, you can not create a whole new book out of it because Laika was not intended to help you to do that. It's more of a fear of the blank page thing. So you'll write a little sentence and it will give you options for what will come next in very short snippets, 2 to 3 sentences at a time max, that are designed to inspire you to think about what's going to happen next. If what you want is this kind of idea of putting in an outline and then getting a book back, actually, there's a tool out there at the moment called Pseudowrite. I'm not sure, have you heard of Pseudowrite
I
before?
have heard of it. Yes.
Pseudowrite
Yeah.
guys just launched a new tool last week called Story Engine that really allows you to very, very quickly write a huge book. But it won't be written in your style. That's the only thing. So it's like there's a whole thing at the moment where people will use the very, very large language models because they have the ability to do huge amounts of things like that and write you big books and everything. But it's not possible without gigantic amounts of money and time to fine tune those models on your own writing. So we're small snippets, but very personalized.
Yeah. So
So
if you want to use it for
yeah.
professional writing, a tweet is more our
Yeah, a tweet
it's
is
also
more
more
our
our
speed.
goal because in the end we don't want to replace the writing process. Like I think a lot of those tools they have their application, and I don't want to criticize them for existing because I'm not as critical as a lot of people are out there, which I also understand. But they're just aiming for a very different end result. They're aiming for the product of interacting. We are aiming for the process. So we want to make interacting with language as something where you can very easily like tap into this cultural history of humanity and just drag something out of a 2,000-year-old book that you didn't know is there, that somehow inspires you to think in completely new ways instead of focusing on replacing writers.
Yeah, you're very much about like making it so that the writing process itself is as fun as possible, not as short as possible. In fact, it's an interesting thing when we ask our users, we have a kind of a questionnaire and we ask them, how different things about Leica. And one of them is, rate, how much you agree with the sentence, Leica saves me time. nobody says Laika saves them time. It's not saving time, but everybody says Laika is fun and Laika makes me feel more creative. So
Oh,
it's
interesting.
that's the side we're going for more than the productivity side of things.
Okay, yes. And so it sounds like I could, if I'm working with clients, I could create a brain for each client and their unique voice and personality. And then I could use the tool, use that brain and start writing. If I needed to write an email in that voice, I could have that back and forth creative collaboration with the tool in their voice. And that's the benefit of this tool over other tools as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I suppose like I would probably not be using it to write an email so much as I would be
Okay.
using it when I'm thinking about brand strategy
Okay.
or potential new uses for the situation or potential new taglines and potential new ways of describing what it is that we're working with and describing like how this particular product works. So it's like taking the kind of the whole shape of the brain of the product and then like attacking it on different angles with different types of questions to get different interesting snippets that might lead you into new spaces. So it's more like the kind of like high level creative director type work than than
Okay.
than writing an email. Because I imagine when you go to write an email, you know exactly what you want to say. Laika has no idea what you want to say and is going to go wildly off topic in,
Yeah.
in what it's saying. So it's more, I think, the high level brand strategy. Would you agree with that, Marmar?
I think it's that the idea is that it can just give you something that you don't expect, but that is already there in the writing you have, in a
Okay.
surprising way. Because what we're doing is like we've been around before ChatGPT. We've been around before this momentary drive of large language models that aim very much for accuracy, for truthfulness, for being very neutral and opinionless and middle of the road. And we kind of see that we are diverging more and more from the general drive. But what we try to do is kind of harness the power of hallucination that is seen as a problem in a lot of applications, because
Oh,
when
interesting.
ChatGPT
Yeah.
hallucinates the order of words and you try to use it to sort a list of words and it sometimes just gets a little bit wrong, then there is a problem. Or when you look something up and it invents books and reference materials and interviews and quotes and court cases sometimes, that is a problem. But for us, it's like there is a lot of creative potential in that as long as you roll with it and make it a part of your practice. So we don't even pretend to be truthful.
Yeah.
It's for fiction, it's for inventing.
It's for the big ideas. And I think one of the ways that might be interesting to think about it, like for especially for your listeners who are writers, like of all kinds of writers, is like we kind of feel like we're continuing in the tradition of like William Burroughs and Brian Gysin, you know, when they invented the cut up technique back in the 1950s. It's like, you know, they said, hey, you know, when you cut up a piece of text and you rearrange all the words on the table, then you find the real meaning of the text, you know, then the truth comes out. It does sound kind of wild, but if you've ever tried to work with cut up technique yourself with a page of a newspaper or something like that, you'll know that you get really interesting results that kind of kickstart your creativity and bring you into a new idea. And this is kind of like that idea. It's like the digital cut up technique. And I suppose for us, we found that it's super useful creatively because it's like the human brain is like this really powerful pattern recognition machine. And I'm sure you felt this feeling like when you're feeling really creative, it's when you're seeing a few disparate things that don't seem to be connected. And then your mind is able to make the connection between those things. And then you're like that, aha, the light bulb moment, the gotcha. That's that feeling that we're trying to bottle up. That's the feeling that we want Laika to give you.
Okay, so as I'm listening to you describe all of this stuff, it seems to me that one of the use cases here might be I have somebody on my team. Maybe I have an idea that needs to, maybe an email needs to go out or a piece of content that we're going to work on, but I don't have time to do it myself. Is this the kind of thing that I can hand off to a team member and say, okay, write in my voice using my brain on Leica? Or is it really a one-to-one thing where I need to be the one kind of bouncing ideas back and forth?
So you absolutely don't need to be the one bouncing ideas back and forth with your own brain. You can hand your brain over to somebody else if you like. Absolutely. But it is just, I suppose, the case that when you hand off your brain to perhaps the person you're working with, the content is going to read as if it's written by you. Um, but it's not, again, like with the email thing, it's not going to follow a very specific train of thought. It's not going to you can't say rewrite this particular paragraph as if Rob wrote it. It's more you start the sentence, it was a sunny day, and then Rob will finish the sentence, if that makes
But you
sense.
will think like this is so
But
Rob.
you will think this is so Rob, and then Rob himself might be horrified when he reads the email later.
I need Rob's brain. I want the jar with Rob's brain so I can access that. So I'm curious how you see writers, creatives using the tool throughout their day. Let's say some type of creative freelancer. Is it something that they just keep open in the background and they're kind of going in here and there? Are there any practices you recommend?
Yeah, I suppose there's a few different ones. So I would say like I just have it open all the time, and then
Okay.
when I need something interesting going on, then I will go and have a look at that. But a lot of our writers use it to ask questions of themselves. So they will ask them, like, for example, we've had two fiction writers so far over the last few months who are writing murder mysteries, and they didn't know who the murderers were in their murder mysteries. And they were like asking questions and like looking around the space, figuring out what was going on, and then figuring out who the murderer was from working with Laika. And it's not going to say the murderer is Jake, it's going to say like the murderer is the last one who left the dinner table, who happened to also be the
Interesting.
person who was in the attic on Tuesday night. And then you're like, oh, you get that feeling of what's going to happen. Yeah. I think it's like when you need some inspiration, that's what it's there for.
Okay, so now we've talked a bit about the tool. I want to go back in time and talk about the origin story. Why this tool? How did you two come up with the idea? And what did the early days of creation look like?
Shai is a video game writer by trade and has been writing big video games. And my background is in computer science. I have a PhD in computer science. And what happened is that we always enjoyed doing small little experiments together, like little Twitter bots, or work with language in interesting ways, or with art in general in interesting ways, as some kind of, I don't know, pastime.
It's our weekend fun.
Yeah. And then a certain thing that you might have heard of happened that is called the Corona pandemic. And during that time, we realized that there is actually this new thing called language models, large language models. They were much smaller back then, but they are still called large language models. And we just started playing with that. And then we saw, okay, this is interesting. You can do interesting stuff with that. It was COVID, so we realized that one of the things we could do is host a workshop for people who want to work with AI but do not have the technical abilities to do so. So we started a little workshop series, got like crazy good people from the get-go and were booked out immediately. We had like 40 seats. It was free and everything, but 40 seats, and got like published authors and Nebula award-winning sci-fi writers and so on taking part in that. It was amazing. But we also saw that it's still far too complicated because we didn't have a system for that. We just cobbled something together that was just good enough to give people a first impression of what it means to interact, a taster, of what it means to interact with a large language model. And after that kind of success, we decided, why not turn it into a product? I was at that point working full-time at the university. So we applied for a research grant that is one of those that is for productizing research, because we had a little bit published about it too. So we could call it research, and we got the grant. So that paid an initial team of up to 6 people at some point to just hammer it into shape and create a minimal viable product. That was done in last October. And then one of the limitations of that grant was that we couldn't found a company yet. So it kind of blocked us from going commercial too early, or from turning it into a professional venture. But that happened then in the last month of last year. And then we got another grant that we are working with now, which is an accelerator, more or less, that comes with a little bit of funding that is also by the state of Denmark. We have to thank the state of Denmark really a lot, because both grants were like state money. So we have only non-dilutive funding, and we have no VCs, so we have a lot of freedom in what we can do, which is great. We would love to have investment too, but it's actually really nice to just have the time to build your own thing and to realize your vision. But that is also why we have been around before the big wave of the ChatGPTs and so on. We've been distracted, but we are kind of always when we're in doubt, we're doubling down on our original vision. No, it's about personalization. No, it's not about replacing the writing process. It's about enhancing the writing process and so on. And that makes it that the existence of these very popular technologies makes it kind of easier to explain what we're doing because everyone has seen writing with AI.
Yep.
But it also makes it harder because now we're only explaining, no, it is not this. It is not that.
Yeah, and we become, I think, more of a niche.
Yeah.
But I think that that's like also one of the things that helps us because there's so many AI writing companies out there that don't really have any moat. You know, there's nothing that protects them because ChatGPT is there and it's all going to be rolled out into Microsoft Word very soon and Google Docs. And you know, if you're just a skin for one of the bigger GPTs, then there's not much to protect you. Whereas we're doing something so different, nobody else wants to do it, and therefore we're safe so far. And getting to get a good head start on the personalized voice and the authentic voice side of things. And I think one of the other things is like Mar and I, like, you know, I've always had this personal motto of, you know, when in doubt, get weirder. And I think that that applies to our company also, of like, you know, if it's a case of like, are we going to do this thing because it's what people expect, or are we going to do the thing that we think is really juicy and really exciting and really interesting, where the real heart is? We're always going to do that second thing and find out where it leads.
So how do you go from there's this cool thing out there, AI, let's talk about it, to saying, let's build this thing? Obviously having a little bit of funding helps with that, but where was that idea where you're thinking, okay, we're playing around with this. Oh, actually, this could be a tool that would help us do X, right? Talk a little bit about that thought process.
So my background is also like I'm a computer scientist, but after a few years in academia, I founded a games company like 15 years ago, and then another one. So it is for me personally very natural to say this could be a company that hosts the development process of a specific kind of product or a specific thing that has to do with technology. And as a computer scientist, it is also like a very logical thing for me to say, okay, this is a technology. I can turn this technology into something or use it in some packaging that makes it accessible. So I think that is like my thinking. And your thinking is always, we have to make things accessible to as many people as possible because that's kind of your purpose in life.
Yeah, to show people they can do things. But I think that that's how Mar was able to do it. But I think the moment where we realized that we were going to do it was when we were just giving these workshops, and like we were just having fun giving workshops and showing people how to do things and sharing the passion that we have for this kind of experimental writing. But then when you see it in their eyes, the moment where they get it and they're like, oh, I can train this with my writing. It's going to write like me. And they see it actually work and they see it in action, even after all like the hassle and how long it took us to get there in the workshops, like without it even being a real tool. It was just like, okay, we gotta make more people's eyes look like this.
Can we make another comparison with another tool, or is that really annoying?
As many as you
Go
want.
for it.
Writer creates personalized branded content. It feels like it's a different level. It's enterprise level. It feels a little different, but can you speak to the differences between maybe that tool and this tool?
You see, I always wanted to try it out. I know that Ryder does that. It's kind of, I think, the only one of the big ones that is doing that in the moment, as far as I can tell. Novel AI does it for the hobbyist market too, but those are the two big examples of doing something very similar. I think it's not that different, actually, what they are doing. I think our differentiation is more that we have all of these existing brains that you can get access to, that are already trained, that are freely accessible. And it's like any moment now it will be 100, or maybe it is already 100 today. We're approaching that. And that, of course, creates a different environment to work in. But also, we just hope that this kind of community around it also creates a certain feeling of belonging to a group that is also a differentiator to more enterprise platforms like Rider. But I think Rider is actually, I don't know what base models they are using. They are very, I tried to look it up. I couldn't find it. I think they are building their own language models. And I cannot say anything about their quality, but I'm pretty sure it is a very powerful tool.
You mentioned base models. That was actually going to be my next question. Are you connecting into the bigger databases like OpenAI or Anthropic or any of that, or have you built your own model without revealing, the secret sauce or whatever? What are those base models that you're playing with?
So in the moment, it is GPT-2. We are kind of open about that because honestly, we look at nearly every new language model that comes along that is roughly in our size category,
In the tunable,
in the
tunable size.
fine-tunable category, and not a single one achieves the level of sophistication in expression that GPT-2 achieves if you get the parameters right.
Yeah.
So that is just why we always come back to it. And we just finished a new training run of looking at the Cerberus models, and we tried the stability one and so on. And either we have to put more energy into getting the parameters right, or they are just not as juicy.
Yeah. But it's really like it is that also that the parameters, like, so we do our fine tuning using very specific numbers that took us a long time to figure out. And those are done on an extremely subjective basis. The whole thing is basically, do I think it produces good writing or not? Me personally, Charlene Putney, not anyone, like literally me. And so we test every single model using loads of different parameters. And every single time so far, it's still that our GPT-2 trained the way we do it subjectively feels like better writing, like juicier writing than anything
And,
else.
and just to be clear, in case somebody's listening that isn't familiar with how models are tuned, this is similar to how OpenAI talks about temperature and some of
Yeah.
that stuff, right?
Yeah. Like we sometimes get the feedback from users that are very active in the AI writing space, like, oh, this is such an old model. GPT-2 is like 2 years old. Of course, the development is rapid, but it's not that rapid. It's like it's still the same architecture as GPT-4. It's still the same principles that are behind it. There have been tunings and changes, but it's a
Yeah.
perfectly solid model. I think it's more solid than most things that have been created
Yeah.
since then.
And I
Maybe
think
Claude is
Claude,
interesting. Yeah.
Claude is interesting because Claude is definitely more suited for writing fiction than the current like bigger crop of the OpenAI models. But you'll notice like when you see people talking about like the qualities of different models, they're always just using like these numbers and maths and going, oh, it's this many tokens, oh, it's using this much stuff. I was like, that doesn't really mean anything for a
It's
fiction
totally
writer, for how
unapproachable.
it's going to
Yeah.
feel, or like or a copywriter for how it's going to feel and how it's going to look. The only way to know how that's going to feel or look is to test with lots of parameters and to figure it out, and then to work with what you have on the other side. And like I know a lot of the AI authors community like are currently really loving Claude because it is more designed for fiction writing than the OpenAI stuff, which is now kind of like sliding off into this fact-based Wikipedia type direction, which isn't of course helpful at all for writing. It's just one of those things like people I think often feel like the numbers is what makes something a high quality or not, but it's like it really is when it comes to writing very very subjective. And when you spend a bit of time working with the different models, you start to see they all have their own little quirks and habits and ticks, and GPT can be trained out of its ticks and into your own personal ticks in a better way.
That's right. I want my personal ticks.
Yeah.
I want to hear more about the community element. That sounds really interesting. And you mentioned, I think, licensing and maybe even building out a platform where we can make money. What does that look like?
So in the moment, what we're practically doing is, if you have a free account on Laika, then anything you produce, like any brains you produce, can only be produced as a shared brain, which means it is shared with the community. That's kind of giving back for getting the free account from us. That, of course, leads to a continuously growing amount of community brains, which is great for everyone. But that is not a very interactive aspect yet, of course. You kind of give it to the community and then the community can use it. You can also take it down. It's still your brain. But that already means, our brains are not our brains. They are actually the community's brains. Specifically, they are actually the brain owned by the creator. We don't claim ownership over the trained language model that people have fine-tuned. It is still theirs. That also includes the responsibility, of course. And that means that if they want to revoke the brain, it's up to them. And our vision was always that it would be very interesting to get big IPs or even small IPs, but just contemporary IPs to, for example, give us a brain that allows you to write fan fiction with the Twilight characters. So you can have a Twilight brain. That would be an insanely entertaining use case of Laika.
Yeah.
Because in the moment, Marcus Aurelius really gets only very little fan fiction nowadays. We are fans. But Lao Tzu and Marcus Aurelius, not a lot of fan fiction being written. So that is one aspect. The other aspect is we are just in the finishing steps of launching an API that would allow you to integrate our service, like our backend, into any other software that you have. So you could just use it as a piece in the puzzle of your own AI system, in a video game, in whatever system you use to write tweets and social media messages or something. So we're very excited about seeing how we can build a community of people that create with what we have made and just use it for something completely different.
Yeah, but we're also trying to actually build like an actual online community where people will share the stuff they make with Laika, and we will have like leaderboards for, you know, the best brain and the person who's using the most things, and having everything shared like that. And we're working on a kind of, we have this like back idea that we're constantly thinking about, of like making a sort of a social media version of Laika. We will tell you about that when we have more to say. But it's currently like the thing that's very exciting for us when we wake up in the morning to talk about with our first coffees.
A leaderboard that puts my brain ahead of Kira's brain, or Kira's brain ahead of my brain. I can feel the competition already. It's
yeah. And so we do a lot of other kind of stuff with the community. Like we have a Discord where people can chat, and we have a YouTube channel where we do our Friday night Laikas and spend an hour making a story or a poem or some philosophy with a brain. So like last week, I made a brain of all of the artistic manifestos of the 20th century, you know, the surrealists, the symbolists, the futurists, all of them. And then we made a new manifesto for experimental writing in 2023 with Laika. And it was really good. It was really, really fun and really good.
So one thing that a lot of people are talking about in the AI space are concerns about ethics and privacy, and even some legality issues. ChatGPT wasn't available in Italy for a while because of privacy issues, that kind of stuff. With a tool like Laika, how are you addressing those kinds of concerns?
It is something that we are thinking about nearly every waking moment, because it is really a weird journey we're taking. There is this argument that you're using all that humanity has curated and suddenly extracting value from it as an AI company. And there is something nasty about that, I have to say. And I get the criticism, not only from a legal perspective, but also from a kind of moral perspective. So we are trying to be the good guys as much as we can by as I said, if you create something, it is yours. It's not ours. We don't claim any ownership over your training material, over your fine-tuned brain, over the things you produce with the brain. That is all yours, your responsibility. Whoever is interacting with our system, it's theirs, what they create with it. So that is one thing. We're very clear in who owns what, and it's definitely in most cases not us. The other thing is that privacy is, of course, a huge concern. Like, I would never put anything private into ChatGPT, because we know that anything you put in there becomes, with high probability, a training material for the next iteration. I know they have a professional tier now where you can actually pay for not being used as training material. But I would not buy for just getting this like basic right to my own data, or retaining the basic right to my own data. And we're in Europe, so we are it's very transparent what laws we have to follow and how we have to look at every data transfer between third countries outside the EU and so on. So it's also something that concerns me, because I have to write this elaborate privacy policy. It's only California and Europe that has laws like that. But I'm a fan of that. I think it's actually great, and people should be educated. Like, I'm happy about the Italian. It was actually the government in the end, I think, that just shut it down because they had concerns that are completely valid. So I think we will have a lot more discussions in the future, and a lot more regulation will come in that will just regulate the market, hopefully in a good way, because in the moment it's also super risky. You start a company and you don't really know what is legal. Like in our case, for example, if someone uploads copyrighted material, there is no real law preventing, like, saying that is illegal. Like the uploading and the fine tuning and then working with it, if you're just working with it and not publishing anything with it, if you're just using it to play around, is that illegal? I don't
Well,
know.
whether it is or not, I take them all down. I am the hammer of God when it comes to copyright.
But what I'm trying to say is like I'm looking forward to actually having more safe ground to stand upon, even if it limits what we can do. Maybe at least we know when we're stepping over a line that we can't see right now because it's a gradient. So yeah, that is our general stance towards ethics and also the huge copyright problems that are there. Because of course our tool could be a copyright breach machine if you use it that way. Just like Microsoft Word could be. So it's not like that's unusual with digital media.
Yeah, and while we're kind of zooming out and going big picture, can we talk about any maybe societal concerns that you all have outside of your company and everything that you're doing? It sounds so amazing, about the pace of change and just the larger companies in this space. Do you feel concerned, or does anything keep you up at night because you know so much more than we do?
Is this the end of mankind?
Yeah.
Please tell
So
us
it's not,
no.
yeah. So it's not keeping me up at night because honestly, I
Okay,
think
good.
climate change is much a more concrete and pressing problem to solve for mankind than a potential future AI that actually can think and is not just writing little messages because it's not enough anyway. So I think, and speaking of that, that is actually something that is, of course, a real concern. These models are huge, like especially the monolithic large models are gigantic. They just eat CO2 for breakfast and lunch and dinner and just keep eating it. And sending one request to ChatGPT is actually really producing a lot of negative effects that we cannot really
Yeah.
afford in the moment. So it is a weird situation we created where we suddenly have this dominating technology that is so problematic in that regard. So I looked at what Laika uses in CO2 budget, and it is two people flying from London to New York. Was what we had used in some since then. So I was like, okay, I've done that flight. So I'm like, and we have like hundreds of people working with it. So it's kind of okay. This is okay for an AI startup. But I would wish for more transparency because there is really, we have to make models more efficient to make them more energy efficient. And we have to just really think how big they should grow before it becomes a real issue.
Yeah, it is another like thing for why smaller specialized fine-tuned models are
Yeah.
better for the planet as
Yeah,
well.
because hopefully they even can run on the end device, like on your phone, pretty soon. They can, but at a speed that is actually good enough. So that is one thing. The whole overall picture of AI leading to the end of mankind, I think it's very unlikely personally, and I'm a computer scientist, so and I've seen how stupid humans can be with technology and how they always have to connect everything with everything else and solve every problem, if possible, with a complicated technology that makes someone rich. That is a pattern that is, of course, always dangerous. But I think there are immediate issues with AI that we should really be concerned with that are more pressing than AI deciding that humanity is a problem for the planet, which it actually is. So it's like there is a real challenge there. But there is, for example, so much bias, especially racism, but also sexism in language models, in image models, in all of those models that is just a reflection of historical bias that just maps how we Westerners, I'm pointing at me here, we Westerners, Europeans, and then Europeans and Americans have written history. And because that is the basis of the writing material, of all the materials that are in there, and it is the people who took the photos were always us. And like working with that requires, I don't know, we have to become conscious of that then we have to actively work with that. Then we have to maybe find technical ways of taking it out of the system until they produce something that is a more contemporary worldview and actually a more global understanding of what it means to be human. And that is a huge challenge. And in the moment you see it with like everything from the software that was used during COVID to make sure that people look into the camera, students look into the camera. I mean, we didn't use it at my university, but it was sensitive to skin color. So it flagged people of darker skin color more easily to be not present than people with a lighter skin tone. That is just because it was a racist algorithm in the end. And problems like that, like really concrete problems of bias that are already in the software we're using nowadays, are actually something we should really be concerned with, because it's not going to get better. It's like the more we just indiscriminately use data to build systems, the more problematic data will be leading to problematic systems. That's a real concern I have.
Mark could talk about this stuff for hours.
Oh,
It's
yes.
like
I'm a university professor.
we go to all these conferences, as the people talking about AI, and you can see kind of people ready to fight and ready to like argue. And then Mara's like, actually, AI is terrible. Here's like 15 reasons why. And they're like, oh, didn't expect you guys to say that.
And yet it is also awesome.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, like so many things, right? It's all about intention and the way you use things, I think. So don't want to focus necessarily or spend the last few minutes we have together talking about the negatives. So I'm curious, you guys have this massive exposure to the AI world. In addition to the tools that you've built, what are your favorite tools and uses for AI, on a day-to-day basis or month-to-month basis? What are you using?
Okay, I love Midjourney. I can't stop loving Midjourney. We have Stable Diffusion integrated in Laika, and I can't stop using Midjourney because I love the way that it looks. I love the aesthetics of it, and I love the fact that I'm a person who's never been able to draw, never been able to make anything like look really good. And now, like I have a yoga class every week. Sometimes I make a little flyer for that, or I make a little flyer for my Friday night Laikas, and I'm able to like really get an idea in my head of what I want the picture to look like, and then make it happen. And it's one of those things where I often see people saying, oh, but it's like you're taking the job of an artist by doing this. It's like, I'm actually not, because I wouldn't be paying an artist because I'm poor. I don't have money to pay an artist. It would either be black text on a white background, or I get to use my Midjourney to make my little picture. So I love Midjourney. I can't recommend it enough. How about you, Mark? What do you love?
I don't love anything as
You
much
hate
as you love
Midjourney.
Midjourney.
I know.
I don't like Midjourney.
And you don't even love Midjourney because you're an actual artist. Yeah.
I don't know.
Taste.
No. I don't know. I was just thinking about that, and I'm using so little AI actually in my day-to-day work that it is shocking. Why? Because I'm, for example, programming in a new programming language. So I have this old school attitude of I want to learn it. So I'm not using any co-piloting services apart from very primitive stuff when I'm writing code. I love Stable Diffusion, not as much as you like Midjourney, but I'm using Stable Diffusion because it gives you more control over things, and it's more interesting to probe the system for me, because sometimes like Midjourney is always great, Stable Diffusion is always a little bit, or very often a little bit, takes a lot of massaging to get it right, and it's weird, and that's just
unsettling, I would say.
Yeah, I get a lot of gratification out of that. But I think I've found so many weird use cases for image generation, like proofing, for example. If you have a product description of something, copy paste it into an image generator and see what it tells you, and you might be surprised because it taps into humanity's accumulated description of what they see in an image. So if you just give a description and you get an image, then that will tell you something about that description. And it's sometimes really surprising. You find that you miss a key ingredient in describing what you've created, or that something is just that could be read in a completely different way. And you can see that from reading the sentence. You can see that from asking ChatGPT, but you can immediately see it if you make an image. So that is an exercise I do a lot.
You're a writer, Charlene. I'm curious to hear where you see the most opportunity for writers, maybe, in the present moment, and as AI evolves even more and we use more and more tools in the future, where can copywriters or just writers in general find those opportunities, work opportunities?
Work opportunities. Well, as I've never been a very successful writer at finding work opportunities.
You're constantly
I've been,
booked.
um, but I suppose I think what's really amazing for me, the thing that's most amazing with AI for writers at the moment is actually things like Grammarly, because there's a lot of people who are amazing at thinking about ideas and form and style and everything, but need that pass for something to look polished. And I know there's so many places, like for example, studios that I've worked in, where I would be choosing like a new writer to join the team or something, and I would look at all of the CVs, and it's like a single spelling error, a single grammatical mistake, and I'm ditching that CV. I'm not gonna give that person a chance because there's so many people applying, right? And it's like I've seen that so like hundreds of times now over the last 10 years. For me, that's like a huge thing. It's like polishing it up, polishing the space, polishing the shape, giving people the form for things, giving people the form for like writing things like CV letters, giving people the shape for setting out their stories. Like I think the stuff like Story Engine is really interesting for people to get drafts together and then fill them in themselves. Like writers write in all different kinds of ways. And one of the things that I've noticed so much with the kind of backlash against AI writing over the last week or so since Pseudo Write's Story Engine came out is people saying things like a real writer, blah, blah, blah. Writers, XYZ. And every time I see that, I'm just like, but writers are all kinds of people and they all work in completely different ways. And some writers are great at one thing and some are great at another thing. And we don't even know what like writer is going to mean in the future and what kind of, like, all we know is that we human beings love to resonate and connect with work that's created from the soul of other human beings in whatever kind of art that is, whether it's like visual or textual, a game, a movie. We love to connect with other human souls, and we're still going to love to connect with other human souls. So I feel like any tool that gets us to enjoy the process of creation and to polish the work that we're doing to a great enough standard that it reaches the maximum amount of eyeballs, the better. I don't know if that was a very good answer. Now that I've said it,
I like it. That sounded like a fantastic answer to me.
Beautiful.
So, Char, Martin, thanks for joining us. If somebody wants to check out Laika for themselves, tell us where they should go, what they should do, which of the plans they should choose, all of that stuff.
Okay, so yes, head to writewithlaika.com, and that's Laika, like the space dog, writewithlaika.com. We have 2 plans at the moment. You can either come in as a free user, which we recommend. Come in as a free user, try it out, try a few different brains, see how it feels. If you want to make your own private brains, or you want to do image generation, or you want to use our character creator, then you want the professional plan, and that is currently $15 a month, or 4 months free if you go for the yearly plan.
So less expensive than ChatGPT Pro, less expensive than a lot of other options. So definitely worth checking out and trying out.
Yeah. And thanks so much for chatting with us. Really enjoyed it.
Before we wrap, I'm curious, Rob, what was your takeaway from this conversation?
Well, I think the coolest thing about this, the whole thing, is the opportunity that we have to create a brain or a tool that writes in our own voice. And this is really what the promise of AI and so many of the tools that we've tried out, some of the tools that we've talked about in previous episodes is all about, is how do we get this tool to help us become more effective? And if you can get a writing tool that starts to write in your voice and can, add to your copy or whatever it is that you're writing in a way that feels very natural to the way that you think, that's a game changer in so many ways. And I know that this particular tool, Laika, it doesn't write paragraphs or chapters, pages and pages, gives you a few sentences at a time. But even that, especially if you're struggling to put together an article or some copy of some kind, can be amazingly useful. And it's just a really cool application of what these tools are going to be helping us do in the future. How about you?
Yeah, and I mean, this tool is created by creative people, and it's so nice to find a tool that doesn't feel just like a tool, and it feels like more of a community And it also feels like they genuinely care about serving creative people like us. And so I haven't found that with a lot of the tools that I've been exploring. And I think that is such a missed opportunity, because ultimately we want to find tools that help us and work well with our brains and how we think and how we solve problems. And I know so many copywriters are still turned off by many of the tools out there, especially ChatGPT, because they feel like it's doing the writing for them and giving them an output that, they're just going to copy and paste, and it doesn't really write as well as they do. But there are these new tools like this one where it can write as a collaborator and write with you and capture your voice. So I think it's just a good reminder for all of us to keep an open mind, because the tools are going to get better and better and serve people like us in unique ways. And I think they're just nailing it. I mean, I'm going to subscribe and test it out even more after this conversation.
Yeah, there's so much weirdness around the discussions of AI in the copywriting world. People who are totally afraid of it, or who are so averse to it because, they feel like it's taking away something, whether it's their thinking ability, their writing ability, whether it's not real. And tools like this, I think, just show how we can be doing AI in a way that isn't exploitative in any way, but helps us actually do things in our business the way that we want to do them. All right, we want to thank Charlene and Martin for joining us on the podcast to talk about the intersection between creativity, brand voice, AI, and how to create all of that in a tool that serves you. Once again, if you are interested in that AI for Copywriters course that I mentioned at the top of the show, go to thecopywriterclub.com/AI4C, AI4C, and you can find out more information there about the new certification that we've just added.
And that's the end of this episode of AI for Creative Entrepreneurs, a Copywriter Club podcast produced by Brandon Burton. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, please leave a review of the show on your podcast app. Or if you're catching this on YouTube, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below to let us know your favorite takeaway from the show. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.